In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, hidden behind vast nebulae and undiscovered star systems, lay the planet Zalara, a world once known for its brilliance and unparalleled technology. The Zalari, a race of majestic beings with silver iridescent skin and minds that could manipulate energy at will, had reigned supreme for millennia. Under the watchful guidance of Queen Zithra, their civilization had risen to heights unimagined by lesser races. They no longer needed war, hunger, or even reproduction in its crude form. Their mastery over bioengineering had allowed them to clone and sustain themselves indefinitely, perfect in their immortality. But immortality had its price. An insidious genetic mutation had begun spreading through their population, attacking their ability to clone new Zalari, rendering the entire race sterile. Slowly but surely, their civilization was beginning to fade. Queen Zithra, the first of their kind and the source of their collective strength, was no exception. The mutation had taken root in her, weakening her once vibrant body. Her shimmering skin no longer glowed as brightly, her once powerful mind now strained to command the energies that sustained her. The ruling council, composed of Zalari elders, gathered in the towering citadel of stars to discuss the queen's condition. Tall windows overlooked the infinite cosmos, casting long shadows across the cold, metallic floor. Their faces, once as emotionless and serene as their queen's, now showed cracks of concern. "Her time grows short," murmured Eldor, the oldest of the council. His silver eyes flickered as they watched the queen, whose once resplendent form now sat hunched in a regal chair, her crown slipping ever so slightly. "If we lose her, we lose everything." "The mutation is spreading too fast," said another elder, Sareth. "Every attempt to repair the genetic flaw has failed. Our cloning systems are useless. Without new life, our empire will fall." As they debated, Zithra's voice, though weakened, cut through the room like a blade. "There is one option," she said, her gaze fixed on the swirling stars beyond the window. "An option we have avoided for too long." The council turned toward her, their collective curiosity piqued. Zithra slowly rose from her chair, her silver gown shimmering in the low light. "Before we ascended to this state of immortality, our ancestors came from another place, another time." Her eyes glowed faintly, as if recalling a distant memory buried deep in the fabric of her being. "The humans, our ancient genetic cousins." A wave of disbelief rippled through the council. "Humans?" Eldor questioned, his brow furrowed. "The primitive species on the edge of the Milky Way?" Zithra nodded. "Primitive, yes. But their genetic code still holds the key to our survival. Their DNA has remained untouched by the manipulations that have left us vulnerable. If we can merge our genetics with theirs, we may repair the damage and restore our ability to reproduce." The room fell into stunned silence. For eons, the Zalari had considered themselves far superior to any other species, especially the short-lived, war-prone humans. To suggest that their salvation might lie in such beings was almost unthinkable. "Your Majesty," Sareth said cautiously, "even if this were possible, how would we find a human with the proper genetic compatibility? And even if we did, would they agree to help us?" Zithra smiled faintly, the wisdom of millennia reflected in her eyes. "I have already found him." The council was silent again, taken aback by the Queen's quiet revelation. "During our long observation of Earth," Zithra explained, "our researchers identified a small group of humans whose genetic makeup has remained remarkably similar to our own ancient lineage. Among them, there is one who stands out. Dr. Aidan Harper, a geneticist whose work in evolutionary biology has already led him close to understanding the truth of humanity's origins." The council exchanged uneasy glances. To intervene in the affairs of Earth, to expose themselves to humans, this was something they had avoided for centuries. The last time they had meddled in human affairs, it had led to chaos and misunderstanding, myths of gods walking among men. "This is madness," Eldor finally said. "To reveal ourselves to a human, let alone propose such a union, it would destabilize everything we've built." Zithra's voice hardened. "Madness would be to sit idly by and watch our civilization crumble into dust. We have no other choice. The time for pride and isolation is over. I will go to Earth myself and present Dr. Harper with our proposition." Her words rang with finality. The Council, despite their reservations, could not argue with the Queen's logic. They knew what was at stake. The survival of their species depended on this impossible plan. And time was running out. Later that day, in the privacy of her chambers, Queen Zithra prepared for her journey. The room was bathed in a soft, ethereal light, her reflection shimmering faintly in the large crystal mirror. As she stood before it, she reached for the intricate control panel embedded in her throne, activating a series of commands. Her silver skin began to shift, morphing and softening into the appearance of a human woman. Her transformation complete, she looked into the mirror, now seeing not the regal, celestial being she had been for millennia, but a tall, striking human woman. Her hair was dark, her eyes piercing and deep, though they retained a faint glow, a reminder of the powerful force still residing within her. She had crafted herself into an image that would be both alluring and authoritative on Earth, knowing that she would need both qualities to convince Aiden Harper of her purpose. As she donned a simple yet elegant Earth-style coat and stepped into the teleportation chamber, Zithra took one last look at her home. Zalara's gleaming cities and floating towers stretched out beneath the endless sky, a testament to the empire she had ruled for so long. This mission, this gamble with fate, would determine whether that empire would continue or fade into oblivion. With a flash of light, the teleportation sequence engaged, and Queen Zithra vanished, her form hurtling across the vast expanse of space toward Earth, toward Dr. Aiden Harper. The fate of her people, and possibly humanity, now rested on the outcome of a single encounter. Aiden Harper's life had always been one of quiet routine. At 32, he had settled into a predictable rhythm, long hours in the lab at Boston's prestigious Halstead Institute of Evolutionary Biology, followed by solitary evenings in his cramped apartment, poring over research papers and outdated textbooks. His fascination with human evolution bordered on obsession. Ever since his first discovery of a set of anomalous genetic markers in ancient human DNA, Aiden had been chasing a theory that eluded mainstream science, a theory that humanity's origins were not entirely terrestrial. His colleagues dismissed him as eccentric, some even called him a conspiracy theorist. But Aiden didn't care. His research was methodical, precise, and too compelling to ignore. Over the years, he had uncovered evidence, strange genetic links, ancient texts, mysterious artifacts, that hinted at humanity's connection to something far older and far more advanced than anyone could imagine. The truth was, Aiden felt alone. His ideas had cost him friends, strained family ties, and even led to the end of his romantic relationships. But he didn't mind the solitude. It gave him time to think, to dig deeper into the mysteries of human evolution. Little did he know, however, that the truth he sought was about to come crashing into his life in the most unexpected of ways. That night, as Aiden sat in front of his computer, meticulously scanning DNA sequences from a new archaeological dig in Turkey, his screen suddenly flickered. The files he had been working on vanished, replaced by a single message that appeared in bold white text. "I have what you're looking for. Meet me at the Black Hollow Inn, 9 p.m. Aiden blinked. The message had no source, no email, no IP address. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he tried to figure out if it was some kind of prank or hack. But before he could react, the message disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving him staring at his desktop. He glanced at the clock. It was already 8:15 p.m. The Black Hollow Inn was only a 10-minute drive from his apartment, an old-fashioned pub on the outskirts of town. Aiden had passed it hundreds of times, but had never gone inside. Was someone trying to lure him there? Maybe someone with access to his research? But how could anyone know about his most classified work? The mystery gnawed at him. Despite his better judgment, curiosity won out. Grabbing his coat, Aiden left his apartment and stepped into the cool, crisp night, heading for the Black Hollow Inn. The inn was a relic of an earlier century, all dark wood and dimly lit rooms, with an air of quiet history that gave it a timeless feel. As Aiden pushed through the heavy front door, the soft glow of candles and the murmurs of hushed conversations greeted him. He scanned the room, looking for anyone who might stand out, but saw only the usual crowd. A few older couples, a couple of locals, and a man with a newspaper seated by the fire. Then, in the far corner, he saw her. She sat alone at a small table near the window, her back to the room, silhouetted by the dim streetlights outside. Her posture was impossibly straight, her dark hair sleek and pulled back. There was something oddly magnetic about her, something that made Aiden hesitate before approaching. As he stepped closer, she turned her head slightly, her eyes catching his in a way that sent a chill down his spine. They were unlike any eyes he had ever seen, bright, deep, almost glowing with a faint silvery hue. "Dr. Aiden Harper," she said, her voice smooth and calm, as though she had known him all her life. "Please sit." Aiden hesitated for a second before pulling out the chair opposite her. The woman was stunning, but in a way that felt otherworldly, her features impossibly symmetrical, her skin so flawless it looked as though it had never known the touch of time. "You're the one who sent the message?" Aiden asked, trying to mask his skepticism. "Yes," she replied, her eyes never leaving his. "I've been watching your work for some time. You're closer to the truth than you realize." Aiden frowned. "What truth? And who exactly are you?" The woman smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was more like the smile of someone who knew a secret far beyond his comprehension. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes glowing a little brighter in the dim light. "I go by Zara here, but my true name is Zithra, Queen Zithra of the Zalari." Aiden blinked, utterly confused. "I'm sorry, what?" Her voice grew softer but more intense, as if drawing him into some unseen web. "I am not from this world, Dr. Harper. I am from a race that has existed for millennia, long before your kind even learned to write. We have watched your species from afar, and now I have come to you because humanity holds the key to our survival." Aiden stared at her, struggling to wrap his mind around her words. "This is insane," he muttered. "You're trying to tell me you're an alien queen?" "I know it sounds impossible, but the truth rarely fits into neat little boxes," she said, her tone calm but insistent. "Look deeper, Aiden. You've already seen the evidence, strange markers in human DNA, anomalies in the archaeological record, gaps in the evolutionary timeline. You've been searching for answers, and I am here to give them to you." His heart pounded. Could this be real? He had always suspected there was more to human evolution than what science currently accepted. But this, an alien queen sitting in a pub asking for his help. "I don't understand," he finally said. "What do you want from me?" Zithra's expression softened, and for the first time, Aiden saw something in her eyes that resembled vulnerability. "My people, the Zalari, are dying. Our genetics have become unstable, corrupted by centuries of manipulation. We can no longer reproduce. If we are to survive, we need to restore our genetic code to its original form. And to do that, we need to combine it with the DNA of our ancient cousins, you humans." Aiden's mind raced, trying to keep up. "You're saying we're related?" "In a distant, ancient way, yes," Zithra said. "Before your species evolved into what you are now, we shared a common ancestor. Our genetic codes are compatible, close enough to repair the damage that has been done to mine, but only with the right human." Aiden's breath caught in his throat. "And you think that human is me?" She nodded, her gaze unyielding. "You, Dr. Harper, have a rare genetic marker that has remained dormant in most of your species. It is the key to unlocking the potential in both our DNA. I've come to ask for your help, to join our genetics in a way that will save both of our peoples." Aiden stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief, curiosity, and fear. Every instinct told him to get up, walk out of the pub, and forget this ever happened. But something about Zithra, her calm certainty, her strange, otherworldly presence, kept him rooted in his seat. "You want me to—" "What, exactly?" Aiden asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Zithra leaned forward, her expression earnest. "I need you to trust me. I need you to help me create a future for both our races." Aiden's pulse quickened. He could feel the weight of her words settling on him, the enormity of the choice he was being asked to make. If what she said was true, the implications were staggering. His entire worldview had just been upended in the span of a single conversation. And yet, deep down, a part of him had always known, always believed, that something like this was possible. Finally he spoke, his voice barely audible. "What happens if I say yes?" Zithra's eyes softened, and for a moment she looked almost human. "You'll save an entire species from extinction, and you'll uncover the truth about humanity's place in the cosmos." Aiden took a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His mind was spinning, but one thought stood out, clear and undeniable. The truth he had sought all his life was right in front of him. He just had to reach out and take it. Aiden stood in his lab, staring at the holographic display of Zithra's DNA sequences. The screen shimmered with layers of alien code, unlike anything he had ever seen, yet strangely familiar. The deeper he dove into the data, the more he began to recognize patterns, similarities with the human genome. It was uncanny. Zithra's claim wasn't just a fantasy or a wild theory. The evidence was right in front of him. She and her people, the Solari, really did share a genetic ancestry with humans, an ancient bond forgotten over millennia. As Aiden manipulated the holographic strands, his thoughts drifted back to their conversation the night before. Zithra's presence had been overwhelming, her words, her intensity, her undeniable power. And yet, in the midst of her grandeur, he had seen something else, desperation. She needed him. Not just as a scientist, but as a man. The realization weighed heavily on him. This wasn't just a matter of fixing a genetic code. It was personal. Suddenly, the door to his lab slid open with a soft hiss, and Zithra stepped inside. Her human disguise was flawless, tall, striking, with dark hair flowing over her shoulders. But Aiden had begun to see beyond it. He could feel the energy radiating from her, an ancient power that pulsed beneath the surface. "You've made progress," she said, her voice calm, yet laced with urgency. Aiden nodded, gesturing to the display. "I've confirmed it. Your DNA is compatible with ours, remarkably so. But the mutation, it's aggressive. It's not just affecting your reproductive systems, it's corrupting the very foundation of your genetics. If we don't act soon, it might become irreversible." Zithra's face, normally so composed, tensed at the news. "How long do we have?" Aiden hesitated. "Weeks, maybe less. The fusion process we're discussing. It's our best shot, but it's risky. I've never seen anything like this mutation before. If we don't get it right, it could kill both of us." Zithra stepped closer, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "I trust you, Aiden. You've been chosen because you are the key. If there's anyone who can make this work, it's you." He turned away from her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. The idea of merging their genetics. It wasn't just a technical procedure. It required a profound connection, a melding of not only DNA but of their minds, their very beings. Aiden could sense it in her presence. This wasn't just science anymore. It was something far more intimate. He sat down, rubbing his temples. "There's something you're not telling me, Zithra. What does this process really entail? Because this isn't just about genetics. I can feel it." She was silent for a long moment, her gaze drifting out the window toward the distant skyline of the city. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. "You're right. The fusion is not merely a scientific procedure. For it to succeed, we must connect on a deeper level, emotionally, mentally, even spiritually. It's not just about blending our genetic material. It's about creating something new, something that bridges the gap between our species. For my people to survive, we must find more than biological compatibility. We must find unity in our very souls." Aiden's breath caught in his throat. "You mean, you need more than just my DNA, you need me." Zithra's eyes softened as she turned back to him. "Yes, Aiden, I need you, your essence, your strength, your will. The Zolari have evolved far beyond the need for physical reproduction, but we've lost something in the process. We've forgotten how to connect, how to feel. Our immortality has come at a cost, and now, to survive, we need to reconnect with those lost parts of ourselves. You represent that connection." Aiden felt a strange mixture of emotions surge through him: fear, excitement, awe. Zithra wasn't just asking him to save her species. She was asking him to help her rediscover what it meant to be alive, to be vulnerable, to be connected. It was a responsibility he hadn't expected, and one he wasn't sure he could carry. But then he looked into her eyes, saw the vulnerability she had hidden behind her regal demeanor, and realized that he had no choice. He had spent his entire life searching for answers to humanity's origins, for a deeper understanding of the cosmos. Now, that understanding was staring him in the face, offering him a chance to be a part of something far greater than he had ever imagined. "How do we begin?" he asked, his voice steady. Zithra stepped forward, her presence filling the room. "We prepare. The fusion process requires both of us to be fully attuned to one another. We must lower our barriers, open ourselves completely. Only then can our genetic codes truly merge." Aiden felt a nervous energy crackle through him. The prospect of being so vulnerable, so exposed, terrified him. But there was no turning back now. He had committed to this path the moment he had agreed to help her. Zithra reached out, placing her hand gently on his chest. Her touch was warm, electric. "You're stronger than you realize, Aiden. I chose you because you have the potential to guide us into a new future." He looked into her glowing eyes and nodded, swallowing the fear that bubbled up inside him. Over the next few days, they prepared for the fusion. Aiden modified his equipment, adjusting the genetic splicing technology to handle the complexities of alien DNA. Meanwhile, Zithra meditated, channeling her energy into aligning herself with Aiden's essence. She showed him techniques to synchronize their minds, to share thoughts, emotions, and even memories. It was an unnerving process, one that made Aiden feel like his very soul was being exposed. But through it all, he found himself growing closer to Zithra. What had once been a clinical, scientific mission began to feel deeply personal. As the fusion day approached, Zithra revealed more about her people, her past, and the burden she had carried for centuries. Aiden learned that Zithra had ruled the Zalari for thousands of years, always strong, always alone. Her people revered her as a god, yet she had never known true companionship. Her immortality had made her untouchable, isolated from the emotional bonds that connected most sentient beings. "I had forgotten what it meant to feel connected to someone," Zithra admitted one evening as they sat in the dimly lit lab. "But you remind me of what we've lost." Aiden listened in silence, moved by her vulnerability. It was hard to imagine someone as powerful as Zithra, feeling loneliness. But in that moment, he understood. She wasn't just an alien queen. She was someone who had carried the weight of her people's survival on her shoulders for far too long. And now, she was trusting him to help carry that weight. The day of the fusion arrived. Aiden stood in the center of the lab, surrounded by the advanced equipment he had rigged for the procedure. Zithra stood across from him, her human disguise shimmering slightly as she prepared to let it fall. This was the moment they had been building toward, the moment that would decide the fate of her people, and perhaps the future of humanity. Zithra took a deep breath, and her form began to shift. Her human appearance melted away, revealing her true self. A being of shimmering silver skin, eyes glowing like twin stars, she was beautiful, alien, and impossibly ancient. Aiden could feel the energy radiating from her, filling the room with a strange, otherworldly hum. "This is it," she said, her voice resonating with power. "Are you ready?" Aiden nodded, his heart pounding. The machine activated, its lights flickering, as it began the process of fusing their genetic material. Zithra stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch his. The moment their skin made contact, Aiden felt a surge of energy rush through him, a connection so deep it took his breath away. Their minds began to merge, their thoughts and emotions intertwining. Aiden could feel Zithra's memories flooding into him. Her centuries of rule, her loneliness, her fear for her people. And in return, he shared his own memories, his own vulnerabilities. Together, they became something new, something neither human nor Zalari. The fusion process intensified, the lights in the lab flickering wildly as the machine strained to contain the power surging between them. Aiden could feel his very DNA shifting, intertwining with Zithra's. It was painful, exhilarating, terrifying. And then, In one blinding flash of light, it was done. Aiden collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. His body tingled with energy, his mind still reeling from the intensity of the fusion. Zithra knelt beside him, her glowing eyes filled with a mixture of relief and awe. "It worked," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "We did it." Aiden looked up at her, his body still pulsing with the strange new energy coursing through him. He could feel the change. Something inside him had shifted, evolved. They were no longer just individuals. They were something more, something greater. Together, they had forged a bond that would reshape the future of both their species. Aiden Harper awoke to a strange sensation coursing through his body. His senses were sharper, his mind clearer than ever before, and yet there was an underlying hum of something unfamiliar, something new. He could feel Zithra's presence even though she wasn't in the room. It wasn't just a memory or a thought. It was a deep, intrinsic connection, as if their very beings had fused at a level beyond anything he had ever imagined. He sat up, feeling the weight of his body differently. His skin tingled and his muscles felt energized. Even his breathing felt smoother, more efficient. As he looked around the room, everything seemed clearer, more vibrant. It was as if he was seeing the world with new eyes that could perceive more than human senses ever allowed. Zithra entered the lab, her silver skin glowing softly. She had discarded her human disguise completely, her true form now on full display. There was an ethereal elegance to her, an ageless beauty that both fascinated and intimidated him. She looked at Aiden with a mixture of relief and awe. "You're awake," she said softly, stepping closer to him. "How do you feel?" Aiden stood, his movements fluid and precise. "Different," he said, his voice sounding slightly deeper, resonating in a way it hadn't before. "Stronger. And I can feel you, Zithra. I can feel your presence inside me." Zithra nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "The fusion has connected us in ways beyond just genetics. Our minds, our emotions, they're linked now. We are no longer separate entities, but part of something greater." Aiden processed her words, marveling at how natural the connection felt. It wasn't intrusive or overwhelming. It was like a new sense had awakened within him, allowing him to understand Zithra's thoughts and emotions without needing words. It was an intimacy far beyond anything he had ever experienced with another human. "Is this permanent?" he asked. Zithra's expression softened. "Yes, the fusion has bonded us irrevocably, but it was necessary. Without this, our species would have faded into extinction. You and I, Aiden, we are now the first of a new lineage, a hybrid race that will carry both the strength of humanity and the knowledge of the Zalari." The weight of her words settled on him. They had created something entirely new. He wasn't just a human anymore, and she wasn't just an alien queen. Together, they had transcended the limitations of their individual species. The implications were staggering. What would this mean for humanity, for the Zalari? "Are your people safe now?" Aiden asked, his thoughts returning to the urgency that had started this journey. Zithra's eyes glimmered with hope. "Yes, the genetic code we have created is stable. With it, I can repair the damage to my people. The mutation will no longer be a threat. We can rebuild." Aiden exhaled, feeling a deep sense of relief. They had done it. They had saved the Zalari from extinction. But as the relief washed over him, a new realization dawned on him. "What about Earth?" Aiden asked, his voice filled with concern. "What happens now? You and I, we're something else now. We can't just go back to living ordinary lives. People are going to notice." Zithra's face grew serious, her gaze distant for a moment as she considered his words. "Earth will be impacted, yes, but not in the way you fear. My people have no desire to conquer or control. We have learned from our mistakes in the past. We seek partnership, not domination." She stepped closer to Aiden, placing a hand on his arm. "Together, we can guide both our species toward a new future. Your people will one day be ready to learn the truth, that humanity's origins are tied to the stars. But it must happen gradually. We will introduce the idea slowly, carefully, to avoid chaos." Aiden nodded, Though the enormity of the task still weighed on him, the world wasn't ready for the truth, not yet. He had seen how humanity reacted to even the slightest deviation from the norm. But with Zithra by his side, he felt a strange confidence, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they could guide humanity toward that understanding. "We can start by repairing your people," Aiden said, his mind already shifting to the logistics. "Once the Solari are restored, we can figure out how to reveal the truth to Earth." Zithra's eyes brightened, a spark of hope igniting within them. "Yes, I will call upon my people, and together we will begin the restoration process. And you, Aiden, will play a key role in this new future. Your knowledge, your humanity, it will bridge the gap between us." Aiden took a deep breath, nodding. His mind was racing with possibilities, with the challenges that lay ahead. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly part of something important, something that could change the course of history, not just for humanity, but for the galaxy. Days turned into weeks, and the restoration process began. Using the fusion of their genetic codes, Aiden and Zithra worked tirelessly to reverse the mutation that had ravaged the Solari. They established a secure lab, hidden deep within a remote region of the Earth, where Zithra summoned her most trusted scientists and healers to begin the process of healing their people. Aiden, now fully embracing his role as a bridge between the two species, became deeply involved in the process. He used his knowledge of human genetics and evolutionary biology to create a stable framework that would allow the Solari to regain their reproductive abilities. As they worked, he began to understand more about the Solari culture, their history, their art, their philosophies. What had once been a distant, alien concept was now something he felt connected to. But it wasn't just science that blossomed between them. Over time, the bond between Aiden and Zithra deepened. What had started as a reluctant alliance, born out of necessity, grew into something much more profound. Their connection transcended mere friendship or partnership. It was as if they had become two halves of a single whole. They could communicate without words, sharing thoughts, feelings, and experiences in a way that no human relationship could match. One evening, as they stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, Aiden turned to Zithra, the wind tousling his hair. "What happens after your people are restored? Will you return to Zalara?" Zithra's gaze softened as she looked at him. "My people will need guidance, yes, but we are no longer the isolated beings we once were. Our future is tied to yours now, Aiden. Humanity and the Solari are destined to share the stars." Aiden smiled, a sense of peace washing over him. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he didn't feel overwhelmed by it. He felt ready. "I want to be part of that future," he said quietly. "I want to see what we can build together." Zithra's eyes glowed softly in the twilight, and she placed a hand on his chest. "You are a part of it, Aiden. You always will be." They stood there in silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The world had changed. They had changed. But with it came hope. A hope that, together, they could forge a future where both humanity and the Solari could thrive. Years passed, and the world slowly began to change. Behind the scenes, Aiden and Zithra worked to rebuild the Solari and prepare humanity for the truth of their origins. Quietly, they influenced governments and scientific institutions, planting the seeds of knowledge that would one day grow into full understanding. A slow, careful process, but one that would eventually reshape the future of Earth. And as the Solari began to rebuild their cities on their homeworld, they did so with a new purpose, not as conquerors, but as explorers, ready to share their knowledge and culture with the galaxy. Under Zithra and Aiden's guidance, the Solari and humanity began a new chapter, one of cooperation, exploration, and unity. The day finally came when the first joint Solari-human ship launched into the cosmos, its mission to explore the farthest reaches of space to seek out new life and new possibilities. Aiden stood beside Zithra as the ship ascended, feeling a surge of pride. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice filled with anticipation. Zithra smiled, her eyes glowing with the light of the stars. Yes, and we have an entire universe to explore, together. The future was no longer a mystery. It was theirs to create.